Here is the entry to my classroom. Once inside, to the left, I have student cubbies, each one labeled with student names. I have long tables set up with 2 students per table. These are much harder to toss if a student's having a tough moment or feeling frustrated. Although it does present some challenges with students needing to share space with one another. Over here is a teacher desk where my EAs do a lot of their work if they aren't directly with a student. And cabinets for storing art supplies and all kinds of other goodies. Each one is labeled with a red note card that says teacher only. So I try to use lots of visual systems in my room to let kids know what they can and cannot have access to. The only cupboard that does not have the teacher only on it is underneath the sink, and that's because I have dishcloths under there. There's 2 buckets. One is labeled clean and one is labeled dirty. And if students have a spill or need to clean something up, they are welcome anytime to go grab one of those, clean up their mess, and then stick it into the dirty bucket when they're done. I keep snacks in a small refrigerator in my room. Appliances aren't allowed at my school, but I find it necessary to have cold water as a strategy for calming students down. I also used to practice dialectical behavioral therapy for a bit, and having some plastic ice cubes that students could use for really strong sensory input that didn't involve any sort of self-injury, but just as a distraction tool when they're experiencing really big emotions was helpful. So having the fridge with like a little mini freezer in there is super helpful. I label this additional cabinet below so that things are really easy for my assistants to find. Let's take a look at some of the behavior tools that I use. So if I go over to one of the students' desks, you'll notice they have a Dollar Tree little organizer here, and I use that to put in their pencil box that is filled with crayons. Everybody's is labeled with their name. I also give them 2 pencils. And then they have these poly binders. I really like the poly binders because the seams do not break as easily. The plastic covered cardboard type binders I find I needed to replace like on a monthly basis, but these particular binders last a really long time and they're not that much more expensive. On top of the binders is my reinforcement sheet. So these are all of the desired and expected choices and actions that I want to see students engaging in on a regular basis. And anytime my assistants or myself catch a student doing it right, we try to load them up with stamps. I just use little stamps that I got from like Oriental Trading. That makes it really fast. It's even faster than like drawing a star or a smiley face on the sheet. Students work for a certain number of stamps per day, and if they reach the quota that is needed for that day, they get to participate in Daily Student Store. I was going broke with a quickness trying to do a student store that involved like little trinkets. So, and they would satiate on it so fast, and I couldn't like get kids an Xbox for pushing in their chair and lining up for recess the right way. Like, it just was not sustainable. So now they work for things like iPad time or an extra recess or extra choice time or an art project that they really want to do. Things that are free that are highly desirable, like I don't bring out the Legos until it's student store time. So if you want to be building with Legos, then you better have earned all your stamps. Anyhow, and I'm happy to get you a copy of the stamp sheet. I tried to focus a lot on the executive functions that I felt were big deficits for students, like emotional control and self-awareness and organization and planning and prioritizing, you know, the things that tend to be a struggle that I was needing to constantly remind students about. Impulse control, like raising your hand, not just blurting out. So those are the things that I reinforce for the most frequently. When you open up the binder, there is a pencil pouch. I try to use a fabric pencil pouch because the plastic ones just get destroyed way too easily. Inside the pencil pouch is an 8-pack of markers that I got for like 25 or 50 cents a piece at Walmart, as well as a 12-pack of colored pencils. I put in 1 glue stick and then 2 regular pencils and 1 eraser, and that's all that goes in there. And that way, no matter what's happening in the class, if I need to clear the room, everybody's supplies are with them, and I don't have to worry about heading back into the room where a crisis might be happening to go and get a writing utensil so that instruction can continue. So having binders is super helpful, and then having the pencil pouches. I used to try to do caddies, but that became too cumbersome and too many things to carry, and things would spill out of it. So I found the pencil pouch to work much better for me. It's best though if you can keep supplies in it limited, and so it doesn't become like overwhelming and bursting at the seams. After that, I have these poly like plastic dividers with pockets on them, and I like the pockets on them because they're divided into, well, obviously 8 different sections, but for whatever the subject matter is, if there's a piece of paper that relates to that they need to save or to reference later for another lesson or an assignment, they just stick it in right there. So I'm teaching skills that they're going to need throughout high school and eventually college. The very first one is my daily schedule. I use a picture schedule along with written words. Everybody gets this, whether they need it or not, and that stops students from pushing back when like, it's pictures, it's babyish. Everybody's using it, and I normalize the use of the tool. I talk a lot about I use big language with them, very fancy. I talk about the occipital lobe and how information that can bypass the frontal cortex gets processed a little bit quicker because you don't have to think about it so much. I talk about the reason why like stop signs aren't just the word stop, but they're red and they're a specific shape, and so you always identify it, and how that helps us to read faster. So it's like a cheat code for life to use pictures. I try to use gaming words that they're all familiar with, like cheat codes. They're familiar with that from video games. And I've found that as long as I present it to them in that way, I don't have any problems with students not wanting to use a picture schedule. We start our morning out with a morning routine that lasts a really long time, about 50 minutes. But I find that it helps them to be engaged. And this isn't just like free time or choice time. We start with some community building. We all have breakfast together. There's something amazing about breaking bread with one another and eating. Like, I work with 4th through 8th grade boys. Making sure their bellies are full is probably one of my number one strategies. We talk about behavior, we practice some mindfulness, and we do some meditation every single day. I talk to them about how meditation is like food for their brain, the same way that exercise and good food grows their body. Meditation makes them mentally strong, and that being mentally strong will make them unstoppable in life. I'm not going to walk you through the entire schedule, but I'm happy to send you a copy of it just so you kind of like see how I have my day broken out. I try to sandwich some kind of movement in between each activity. I do have 2 classrooms, and I try to transition between the 2 classrooms pretty frequently, and have certain classrooms used for certain types of routines. So this one that I'm in right now, room 162, has the tile floor. We do all of our eating, so breakfast, lunch, snacks in here. A lot of our art projects are in here. The other room has carpeted, and we do a lot of our academics in there. It makes it quieter. The acoustics are a little bit better, so we do our reading, writing, and math in that room whenever possible. Each education block I try to break up into like 30 to 45 minute chunks, and then within there I break that up even further. So I might have a mini lesson, independent work, another mini lesson. I use a lot of workshop style classroom management, like Daily 5 and Cafe for reading has been a great classroom management organizational system for making sure that my workshop runs really well and that I get individual time with each student because each kid is at such drastically different levels academically. So that's 4 pages of a schedule. Kids know exactly what to expect at all times. If I look up at my whiteboard, I also have my schedule posted along the left-hand side of the whiteboard there, and I reference that throughout the day. I constantly play dumb, like I don't remember what's happening next, and I ask students to please open their binder, or I will stumble up to the front of the room and try to remember what's next. So again, I'm modeling and I'm normalizing the use of the tools all the time. Then when let's look back at the binder again. Next section is a problem-solving section. The first aspect of that is our self-control strip. So if a student sees me put my hand up or say I'm waiting for calm, they know exactly what that means and what my expectations are. They're sitting, hands are to themselves, feet are down, calm and safe. Their mouth is quiet. They can slowly count to 20 without screaming by the time they get to the end. And they can take 3 deep breaths, breathing in slowly, holding it for at least 1 second, and then breathing out slowly. It's up to a teacher whether or not they choose something from a calmer list. Sometimes students would intentionally escalate, so they would have the chance to use something that they thought was going to be a fun tool. So to prevent that, I made sure that I wrote in here that it was always teacher's choice if they got a calmer and the type of calmer that they got. And that seemed to really nip that piece in the bud. I do work a lot on those 3 R's, the regulating, relating, and then resolving. So first, calm. I tell them all the time that nothing moves forward until they're calm, safe, doing it right, and that we have to problem solve every issue that comes up. They all know that that's my expectation. Next part of my problem solving process is to check in with how they were feeling. I have this color coded with the zones of regulation. I tried to make sure that items from the green zone were also listed within the yellow zone, because we can be excited in a way that's manageable, and then we can be excited in a way that's like, oh, we need to bring it down a notch. And I also have some blanks so that they can write in whatever they need to. As you can see from the shine on here, it's all laminated, so dry erase markers or wet white markers work really great on it. Next is the problem page, so identifying what the problem was, and I have this broken out into the different types of problems, like a feeling problem, a people problem, a body problem, or something else. And then from there, we try to find 2 solutions to help fix it. These are all pretty vague enough that they're able, whatever they think a good solution might be, or that a teacher or myself might think is a good solution, that we can kind of squeeze it in to one of these sections. So like taking a break, there's 100 different ways that could happen. Using your words to say it politely, like there's 100 different ways that can happen. Asking for help, there's a lot of different ways that could look. So they aren't like very specific phrases, but kind of general choices and actions that they could take to help resolve the issue. Next section is my calmers and alerters, and I leave all of these blank until the school year is started. I like to give students the materials as I'm introducing them, so their binders are pretty empty when they first get them, and then as I introduce a new concept and I use my gradual release towards being more independent with the tools, then they start adding them to the binder, and then throughout the year I will reference it, or we often stop everything that's going on in class to address an issue, and it's never a punitive thing. I always say, man, I am so glad this happened. That gives us a chance to go back and use our tools. Let's open up our binders to the social story section, and I'll tell them which story I want to take a look at, and then how we could apply the lesson from that story to the situation that just arose. So calmers and alerters, things they can do to chill themselves out. I put in like my lazy 8 breathing or 3-5-7 breathing or some other zones of regulation tools in here. I also give a self-inventory that's like 3 pages long with different types of fidgets and flexible seating and things like get a drink or hot water or cold water or having a crunchy snack or a deep chewy snack or different types of tools, and students self-rate whether or not they think that something is a calmer for them or an alerter to help wake them up if they're getting bored and tired. And then, or even like a choice item, like maybe it's neither of those, or maybe it's all three of those. And then I have the teachers, so myself and my assistants also do a rating, and then we compare those. And I try to use that to come up with an individual inventory list for each student. Next section is for our social stories, and I have a social story for just about everything. This section ends up really full by the end of the year. I rely on social stories a lot to pre-teach my procedures and to pre-teach my expectations, and then to go back and do problem solving. After that is choice. So oftentimes, when kids are done early, it's not enough to just have it on the board what their options are for quiet time by themselves. So I have a visual that goes in here. Then a section for reading and writing. So there's some graphic organizers that will go in here, some editing pages that everybody uses, some word banks that everybody uses. It's one of the ways I differentiate is, if there's a tool that works for somebody, it's probably going to work for most people. And then I tend to just stick it in everybody's binder. They also will have a composition book that I use for their written reading response after our read aloud. I try to hit some of those ELA pieces that are harder to get in during the workshop, and use that during our read aloud time. The guys really love the read aloud time, and it's just one more chance for me to hit some of those comprehension skills. And then I have them do a journaling exercise after read aloud that's, at least one complete sentence related to whatever comprehension skill I'm working on that particular week. And that will go inside this pocket right here, so it all stays together. Next is for math. Everybody gets a multiplication table. Everybody is going to get a place value sheet that's laminated that they can use for writing. There's, some universal tools that will go in everybody's section. Also, I also use the Daily 3 for math, and there's computer time is one of my stations, but there's also individual packets that kids are working on. So if they're not on the computer and they're not at some kind of a center, they're not working with a teacher, there's usually some kind of independent work that I want them to be practicing, and that packet goes in here. So, it's at least a week's worth of lessons at a time, so I don't have to constantly keep prepping a new thing and a new thing and a new thing. And that will just stay in here until they're done and ready to turn it in. And then last is STEAM. I was finding in the afternoons, it was really hard for me to, with their attention level and their energy levels, to keep them engaged with academics unless I was able to make it a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more hands-on. Like, I could not get these guys to put a ruler in their hands until we were launching marshmallows, and then suddenly everybody knew how to measure because they were in a race to see who could launch their marshmallow catapult the farthest. So my engineering design process goes in here. I also have some pattern sheets when we're looking at Romero Brito or some other artists and trying to mimic their styles. So I have some Zentangle patterns that I will put in here for, individual doodling. A color wheel will go in this section, things of that nature. So that is the student binders. That is probably I would say my most important tool. Next up is my zones of regulation bulletin board. I have a laminated sheet of paper underneath so that we can talk about any particular problem that had come up. And I can use a dry erase marker to chart that out, but it's a big visual, so I can reference it throughout the day all the time. It's one of my most important boards. I use a visual timer to pre-warn for transitions. The time timers are really spendy, but I find that they're worth it. You can also get super cheap ones that you can add to a phone. There's ones that you can get that you can upload onto your laptop and then use with your projector so that it's on a screen or whatever. There's a ton of you don't have to spend $30 on the time timer. I just really liked it, and my district was kind enough to purchase it for me. I use hand signals. Getting kids to raise their hand was tough. And once I got them to raise their hand, I was finding I was constantly calling on kids, and what they would have to say was nowhere near like what was currently happening in the class. So I was using hand signals. So I know, like, if you need a break, they use sign language letter B for break so that they can ask for a break. If they need a drink of water, they show me a W, and that way any of my assistants can go fill up their water bottles. If they need to go to the bathroom, they show me the sign language sign for restroom, and then I can say yes or no, they can go to the bathroom. And it just helps me to know whether or not whatever it is on their mind, if it's actually pertaining to, you know, the content that I'm trying to cover in that moment. I also keep a bigger poster of my self-control problem solving process here. So it's in their binders, but it's also posted on the wall. My alphabet is, I got from Teachers Pay Teachers, and it has a bunch of different coping skills. So like A is for art, and B is for belly breaths, and C is for counting to 10. So that's tools that they have access to all the time, that's visually posted for them, and you know, they just look pretty. Again, going back to gamifying things and using language that the kids use, I ask them to back it up and rewind, or to put something on pause for just a moment and let them know that we'll get back to it. That's especially helpful when the kids are having a hard time shifting and they don't want to stop doing one thing in order to move on to doing something else. So I'm not telling them no, or that they can't do it, or that, you know, it's going away forever. It's just, we're pausing it, and just like you would pause a movie or pause your video game, it'll be here when we get back, but we need to move on to this other thing, and then we'll circle back to this later when we have a chance. My last bulletin board over here covers whole body listening. One of the things that's most important to me are those last two. The brain is thinking and the heart is caring about whatever the speaker is saying. Like, if I just got done talking about with the whole class, and we had this really nice Q&A on like Superflex and Brain Eater, and somebody raises their hand and they have a comment, and I call on them, and then they want to tell me about the amethyst gemstone that they just got at the store over the weekend and how it's really cool, and maybe we could do a gemstone dig field trip. It's nice to be able to reference my whole body listening board. I'm like, sir, was that like on topic? And if not, you know, how does that make me feel? Like, maybe that whatever it is that you were thinking about isn't what I was thinking about. That makes me feel like you don't really care about what I have to say. So then it gives me an opportunity to provide that perspective taking for, you know, what it's like for other folks. Very last piece is my level system. Everybody starts out on level 2 trust. Level 2 trust is like the standard stuff that everybody gets a chance to do, like participate in class and have class parties, and you know, so it's somebody's birthday, enjoy the cupcake with everybody else, have recess outside, participate in student story, you know, all the good stuff. There's an entire system that I go through, and there's like a 3-page handout that I give to parents at the beginning of the year, and I talk about it during our morning behavior meeting at least twice a week, like all year long, so the kids really get it well, about what it takes to move down to level 1 and what they can do to prevent that. But if they do move down to level 1, that's restricted, and it might mean they move to a level 1 desk or a level 1 seat. They're not allowed to do any kind of activities with other people. So it's lame, it's boring, they don't like it, and you know, it's in their best interest to try to get off of level 1. And I have a whole system for what it takes to get off of level 1. And it's not as cumbersome as some of the other level systems that I've seen used elsewhere. This is a very modified level system that I try to make sure is really like not punitive in the least. Like, level 1 restricted is a day of reflection, essentially. And it's super easy to move yourself back to level 2 trust as long as you're, you know, safe. The last level here, it's kind of covered by my drying rack, is 2+. So every 5 days that a kiddo is on level 2 trust, they earn a plus, up to 3 pluses, so they can be level 2+++. And each plus equates to a privilege that they chose. So at the very beginning of the year, I do an inventory of things that they would like to be working for that year. Some kids, it's more time in gen ed. For some kids, it's going to be, you know, having recess with their gen ed class. For somebody else, it might be being able to run an errand outside of my classroom. For somebody else, I have a student who really likes to take things over to the high school that's across the street, and so I like create jobs that they get super into. And every 5 days is a plus, and after 3 pluses, I cut it off because it's too much to manage. But they like that they get to choose what their privileges are. All right, so we've got a drying rack, and this is for organizing my yarn. We do all kinds of art projects all the time in here. My cord setup is really not the best. I haven't had any problems with kids using that stuff unsafely because they love that that's where I hook up my dock camera for the projector, and they like when I do things on that. So they know that not using that safely means that that goes away, and nobody wants to lose like the YouTube read alouds. So let's see. Some tools that are used regularly go on my windowsill along the side here, like some flexible seating, and there's a kiddo that sits where that water bottle is that needs some additional tools, and I have those set up right behind him, so whomever is working with him has the tools that they need for super quick access. In the back of the room, I have my menu system. So the menu is posted on the top left-hand corner, and then I write in all of the options, and then there's kiddos' names on cardstock that I've laminated, and I put a magnet behind it, and they just use their magnet to make their choices. So Isaiah, for example, wants breakfast pizza on Tuesday, and for lunch he wants to have the corn dog and tater tots that are going to be served. So he just puts his name there, and that makes it really easy for my assistants to order their lunches. My calendar and our birthday calendar, a copy of my self-control process hangs right next door to my break space. So when a student needs to access the break space, or a teacher needs to head on in to help do a problem, like go through the problem solving process, it's really quick, easy access for them to just grab that. I keep it laminated and put on a ring. One of everybody's favorite tools here is the rocking chair, and they all ask permission to use it. It's kind of fallen apart a little bit. That's okay. Maybe I'll get a new one soon. Back here is my compliment wall. So I have some quotes up top about, growth mindset, like if you quit once, it becomes a habit, don't quit. Everybody loves the quote about Michael Jordan, and they like, when celebrities are sharing things. I have a time in my schedule that includes practicing giving and receiving compliments, and I use some printouts of growth mindset compliments for teachers to give, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's inside one of my cabinets. So let's say Isaiah is one of my students. I would say, Isaiah, I have a compliment for you. I really love how you tried your best. You tried 3 different solutions before you came to me to ask for help. That was a really great job of trying it by yourself first. Nicely done. And then he'll take his compliment and stick it to his name tag that's on the compliment wall. The kids really like seeing their trail. They end up like going all down the floor, and I have to like circle them back and double them up, and it becomes really unruly. And then when I take it down, sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly, like with report cards, and send them home, it's probably the thing that they are the most proud of. And parents make a really big deal about all the compliments. So after I've given Isaiah his compliment, I'll ask him to, Isaiah, would you please give Ty a compliment? And then he's going to say, Isaiah will say something nice to Ty. And we talk about how to give a compliment. They're not allowed to just compliment, hey, Ty, nice shoes, or something along those lines. It has to be specific. Like, Ty, I noticed you got upset earlier, but you totally used your tools, and I really appreciated that. Like, nice job. I know it can be hard, but you did it. So it's cool to hear them reinforcing one another for using their tools. But it's something that we explicitly teach and teach and teach and practice and practice and practice. And sometimes we have to circle back and go, oh, let's remember what a compliment actually is whenever those teachable moments arise. Okay, so here's my art cabinet. And inside the walls of my, like inside the doors of my art cabinet, and just have these pockets that I've got stuck up here with growth mindset compliments. So it's super easy for my EAs to just grab them. Like, even though it took you longer than expected, you didn't give up. Awesome. Or way to persevere when the going got tough. So they're vague enough to apply to so many different kinds of situations. And then we can give something that's a little bit more specific to go along with it, but they still teach, those distress tolerance skills that I want each student to walk away from my class really knowing. Then if I open up the other side of my cabinet here, it's each student's name. And so throughout the day, my teachers are expected to, when they notice a kid doing something amazing, to grab one of those compliments and then stick it to this side, so that by the time that we get to our compliment time of the day, everything's here. So when I'm running compliments, I can walk in and these are already filled up. Otherwise, it just takes way too much time. So I'm constantly, I tell my team they're +1s, like mini wins. What's like a way that we could get just +1 more efficient here, or +1 easier, where we can have the same impact and meet the same goals, but it takes us a little less time. It's a little bit more streamlined. It takes a little bit less work for us. That's actually how these came into being, because writing compliments out on these die cut stars it was taking a half an hour out of the day, and I just didn't have a half an hour to spare. But with them already pre-typed out, it was easy to just take a glance, grab what I needed, and then stick it over here so that when it was compliments time, I could say, Charles, my gosh, it was incredible the way you were a fantastic model of courage and determination today. Dynamite. And then I try to give an example that's, specific about what did he actually do. And I might say, you know what, you were in, Miss Chrissy's group a lot today. So I'm not sure what that example looks like, but Miss Chrissy, could you tell us a little bit more about what he did that had you so impressed?